All right. Any questions? Okay, let me try to get some questions going here. So, as part of my dreary duty of running plagiarism checks, I get to look at everyone's submissions. So I've looked at a draft submission here, and first of all, my feeling is if you want to plagiarize, at least plagiarize something that's working. So this is this thing with the section number comparator, and so let me get a piece of. So we have this problem. We want to compare things like 1.4.2 against 1.3 and figure out which one comes before, right? But of course with the dots, there's no limit to them, so it could be this. And they could be two-digit numbers, so this could be a 10 and this could be a 9. And so at this point here, it seems to me that it's going to be pretty hopeless to solve this with just a single do something and then an if-else. So if I were to look at a solution that looks like this, and that's all that it is, I don't think it's going to work. Why? There seem to be too many things going on, right? Let's say it's like this. Somehow one has to say, okay, this one is the same, this one is the same, aha, here they're different. And I don't see how you can do that with like a single line of code. So some people said, oh, I'll convert these to floating point numbers. And those got shot down on Piazza very quickly, right? For the obvious reason that there's too many dots there. Someone said, well, what if I replace the dots with nothing? And then compare lexicographically. Would that work? So if I simply removed all of the dots, let me try it, okay? Yeah, now they're all gone. And now it's a string. Or maybe I could turn it into a number, right? I could now call integer.parseInt. So is this going to work? Can I now compare these numbers? It seems like it's going to work, right? The first number is 321,042. That is a lot larger than 3,293. So therefore one would conclude that it comes later, right? Okay, make me a counterexample. Make me an example where that simple algorithm does not work. So my algorithm was, yes? Yeah. Well, I'll just give you a much more dramatic example. I'll put a 9 in here, and then 3.29.9 has to come after 3.2.1, but the number is still smaller. So I'm sure your example would work just as well. And so there's any number of situations where this algorithm doesn't work. So just removing the dots and looking at them as integers doesn't work. Just removing the dots and looking at them as strings doesn't work. Yeah?
I saw an example where they added zeros until the string lengths were the same.
Yes, so that could potentially work. So you could take the string length and then you could add a humongous number of zeros, but just the right spot in every slot. But if you do that work, can you do that without a loop?
That'd be a while loop.
What's that?
It'd have to be a while loop.
Yeah, so that's what I think too. And if you do that, then you might as well just do the loop to do the regular comparisons. I don't think that buys you anything. You had a suggestion. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, sorry. It looks like it was there, but so if her check says it passes, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. I did use it
Ah.
and it won't pass.
Yes, that is totally correct. So it may be that the person who set up the test cases was a blistering idiot, that would have been me, and did not put in enough test cases. That would probably be the case because I did not even think of someone doing something like that. And so just because the test case is passed does not mean that you have the right solution.
You mentioned you like right in directions.
No, that I should not do, because if I gave you the detailed directions like that, I would not prepare you for what you need to be able to do. So it is not your job to pass the test cases. It is your job to solve the problem, and the test cases are that's there to help you. So it is entirely possible that the grader, who has to grade 160 of these, might not catch on to this, and you might just get full points. But now, of course, I'm going to tell the grader to look out for a version that actually has a chance of solving the problem, because I got concerned when I looked at it. Yes?
So on the slides you said for C we need to use a while loop. You mean for this one, right? So
Yeah, I don't, I'm not saying you need to. Maybe someone can come up with a really clever way that's not obvious to me to avoid a while loop. I'm not saying that you need to, but I'm saying that unless I see either great cleverness or a while loop, I don't think it can be the right solution. Yeah?
Well, why did you compare to method and then past?
Well, okay, for the and past, you now have to ask yourself, did I get lucky, or is this a reasonable mechanism? And so if you just use comparative, like if, let's say we simply compare the strings. So I'm going to take 3.2.10.4.2 and 3.29.9. And now you said you use the string compare.
Yes.
And will that always work? So, and it might. That has a chance of success because the way the dot works. So let's push that back and let me tell you what the normal algorithm is, how people do this. And then we'll see whether yours works by a fortuitous accident. And what counterexample I would have to come up with to kill it. All right, so the normal algorithm is like this, that you say, we have these sequences, and they're just sequences of numbers. So first you take them apart into individual numbers, and then you compare adjacent numbers. When you find, let me take this 9 away again. When you find that the numbers are the same, you move on to the next one. Now it may be that one of the sequences is then shorter than the other. For example, 3.1 versus 3.1.4. You said this one checks, this one checks, this one here, the second one is just longer, and that means that the second one comes after. Or if the first one is longer, then the first one comes after. So you would loop through the numbers as long as the the pairs match, you keep on going. If one of them runs out of numbers, then you have your answer. You also have your answer if two of them are different. So in this situation here, these are different, and then you can tell which one is larger than the other. Now here's where I don't think that the string compare is going to ultimately work. Because when you look at the string compare, if you were to just if you just left them as strings, and now you compared them, what would happen? Which one would come first? Well, let's just try it. Let's make sure we got the same ones. So I'm going to take 3.2.10.4.2 compared to 3.2.9.3. Now, which answer do I want to get? Do I want to get a positive number or a negative number? I would like to get a positive number because it comes after, right? But I get -8. And the reason that you get -8 is that only these two get compared by string compare. It doesn't pick up the 10. So what you really have to do is you have to loop and you pick through the numbers. If someone out there comes up with a clever way of doing it correctly, and with correctly I mean, correctly for all inputs and not just the 5 ones that I passed, that I gave you. If you come up with a way that doesn't use loops, I'm willing to pay $1, a whole $1 to the first one. All right. So I don't know if such a method exists. There might be one. So what you have to do is you have to take this array of numbers. No, first of all, you have to make it into an array or an array list of numbers, or maybe you loop and you extract as you go along. You compare the ones that are in matching positions. And when you find a mismatch, then you figure out what the answer is. When one of them runs out, then you figure out what the answer is. That's the algorithm that you need to use to solve this problem. So I will figure out some way that the grader checks for that. That brings me to the other thing that I want to say. And I've gotten a number of people who say, hey, we're having these study groups, and we're just coding this all together in perfect harmony. And it's not going to work. So a study group is a great thing to have. A study group is a great thing to discuss what is this problem? What might be some of the intricate parts of the problem? Why might this be a difficult problem? How can one solve it? What would be a good algorithm? So those are great things where one can sit on a table and talk about these things and figure out what an algorithm would be, try it out with a few examples on a whiteboard or on sheets of paper or something like that. Study groups are great for that. And so I encourage you to have a study group for that purpose. Once you have an idea on how to solve the problem, once you have some basic strategy, and what remains to be done is to reduce it to code, the only way to code is to do it on your own. At that point, you need to get away from the study group, get into some quiet place, become one with your laptop, and do the coding on your own. That's the only way you can learn. It is impossible to learn by watching other people code and by watching other people struggle. It's just like learning the piano. You cannot learn the piano by watching someone else tickle the ivories. It has to be your fingers. And so if at any point with these homeworks you find yourself not typing in every single character, every single brace, every single whatever with your own fingers or with control space, where Eclipse fills it in for you, that's fine. If you find yourself copying and pasting, you're not benefiting from what this thing is there for. These homework problems are not there to produce software for a startup or anything. They're carefully designed to make you think, to make your brain better than it was before you did that homework assignment, so that when you're done with 46B, that you are a competent programmer for the kind of stuff that we're doing in 46B. And you've got to do it. You've got to take the time to do it. So in your study groups, by all means, talk about, what are the challenges? How does one approach this kind of thing? But the reduction of the algorithm to code is something that you should not do with anyone else. If you run into technical problems where like some kind of stuff doesn't work, like stuff that should be working is not working, like some method call is not doing what you expect, Eclipse gives you grief or whatever else, then of course, something like Piazza is a great tool for that. So make sure to make that distinction. The tutors will do the same for you. The tutors might get you to the point where you understand the algorithm. The tutors will not write the code for you for this very reason, that the whole point of these exercises is for you, with your own fingers and your own brain cells, to put this code together, one laborious character after another, except for control space. Yes?
So if we wanted to go back and check 3D, so that's an example of a test case we can add to make sure it's covered?
Yes, so you can add those, when you test it in the comfort of your home, and in a situation like that, I'm going to have a look at this and see if I really messed up the test case. I might just add a few more. If that happens, this might happen once in a while, that I just find that my test cases were insufficient. If you happen to have a signed zip file in your hands that didn't use those test cases, and you already submitted it, then you might be in luck. I wouldn't hold that against you. But if you haven't and a new test case gets added, that's just the way it is. I will also tell the grader to have a good look at the algorithm, not for the draft. The draft is gone, but for the final, to make sure that the algorithm that you implemented had a prayer of success. Questions? So at this point, the problems are getting more intricate, and so you should make an effort to understand the problem and not just be grateful when the tests happen to pass. Discord. Now let's see. There was another problem that I felt that I was astonished that I didn't get more questions on. Let me get this other homework, and that was. No, that's two. All right, yes, and that's this one here. So here we have an input format that, let's find a sample file. So yeah, at this point we're making the assumption that you have coded correctly the multi-choice question, and then now you're on to read this kind of stuff. And so the question that's worth discussing in your study group is, how the heck do you do this? So you're going to be reading, okay, are you going to be reading a line at a time, a word at a time, a character at a time? Oh dear. A line at a time, right? I mean, if anything cries out for line-oriented input, it's this, right? There's no, if you read a word at a time, you don't see where one line starts and it ends, and so that would certainly be bad. And if you were to read a character at a time, that would be super tedious. And so you would read a line at a time, and so now you read this line here. Do you know what this line is? It's always the question, right? The first one is always the question. What can you do with it? Nothing. Because you don't yet know what object you can call set, is it set question? Set text? You have to call set text on some object. Can you construct that object yet? You can't, because you don't yet know whether the object is a question or a choice question or a multi-choice question. So the only thing you can do, since you can't go backwards in a file, is to save it in a variable for later use. So now you're going to read in the next line here. What can you do with this line? When you read this line, do you know whether you're going to have a question or a choice question or a multi-choice question? Maybe. So what I want you to do in your study group is to talk about that with each other and to discover what strategy you need to employ to get this problem to fruition. This is not a problem where you can sit on the computer and type that right answer right away. Not from looking at the many, many blank faces, scared faces, uncomfortable faces that I see here right now. This is a problem where you have to have a strategy, and you have to develop that strategy. So go and talk to other people and say, what would be a good plan of attack here? What do I do with these strings? When do I know when I can actually construct the object? What do I do with the strings in the meantime? So that's the kind of thing that you should come to a conclusion for. You should have an exact plan in your mind, and once you have that plan, so that you could do it by hand following that plan, then it's a good time to start up Eclipse and to start coding. So we're right at this juncture. This must have happened in 46A as well, when you did things with arrays where things got a little hairier. You're right at this juncture where the worst part of doing, the worst way of trying it is to start Eclipse. If you start typing in something right now when you don't yet know what you're going to do it, you're going to be wasting an enormous amount of time. So don't start doing anything Eclipse until you know what your plan is. If you don't know what your plan is, you're wasting your time in Eclipse. So don't do that. All right, so now let me rush through the lecture here, since I've talked about all this other stuff, important stuff actually. So you've read about basic text I/O, and it's pretty simple. There's nothing really new. All you have to remember, instead of system.out, you use a print writer, and you use a scanner for what you already used a scanner before. You construct these with a file parameter, where the file object takes the name of the file. One important thing that the book was kind of casual about is that when you read something, and really also when you write something, I should put that in here as well. When you read something, make sure to tell the scanner that you read it with UTF-8. So in this class, you're allowed to use any character set that you want, as long as it's UTF-8. So in the virtual machine, of course, you get UTF-8 automatically. Otherwise, if you use Emacs, you know how to make UTF-8 from the lab, and that is important whenever we use special characters. So be sure to specify the character encoding. Now, we're going to cover exceptions on Monday. Until Monday, what you're going to have to do with every main method and with every other helper method that you might have, you need to tag it with this line, throws file not found exception, or throws I/O exception, if in fact in that line you make a new scanner or a new print writer. Now, when you read, you have a fundamental choice to make. Do you want to read numbers? Not going to happen in the near future, but if you do, you know from the past how to do that with next and next double. Do you want to read lines? Very, very common. You read a whole line at a time, and then you fiddle it apart. Do you want to read words? Not very common, actually, because most of the time the kind of input that we have is kind of line-oriented, or you might want to read the entire file or something. But it does happen once in a while. It happened in Homework 1 Draft. Do you want to read actual words? Then you can use this thing with a delimiter. Happens once in a while in examples when I have you process all of the words in Alice in Wonderland or some such thing. Do you want to read in one character at a time? No one ever wants to read in one character at a time. It's a bad day whenever you have to do that, but once in a while you write programs where that is the case. When you need to like encrypt every single character, you need to read a character at a time. If you have stuff that is not line oriented, but you still need to find special features, for example, matching quotes, you might have to read one character at a time to find the first quote and then the next quote on a different line. It might be more tedious to do it in a line-oriented way. So, but it's not very often. You have one example in the homework where you have to read punctuation marks and stuff. So that's a common application. If you were to write a Java compiler, you would be reading in a character at a time because the lines are not meaningful, right? You could write your entire program on a single line. So generally, the first plan of attack is probably to try to read a line at a time. Once in a while, you need to classify characters. You need to make a reaction on if something is a uppercase letter, a lowercase letter, a number, or some such thing. For example, fortunately, I say, do you have to do that? I'm trying to think about the thing with the section numbers. There you just need you need to know what something is a digit, right? Because you're going to be looking at digits, 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 and then the period, then more digits, then the period, and then a space. So you might want to know, is something a digit? Then you need to use these classifier characters. And so these characters are unhappily in the character class and not in the string class. So if you want to use this digit, you need to feed it a car. Now, car are not nice. And so the general rule of thumb is don't use a car unless you have no choice. And the reason, okay, what's bad about car? So why a car not good? Why do you want to stay away from car when you can? It's on the slide. The reason that car is an evil type these days is the smiling cat with heart-shaped eyes. The smiling cat's ruined us for us. Why? You may not be done with lab 3, so maybe I'm giving away an important secret here. It needs 2 car values to be encoded. So that character, no, we had in lab 2, right? So this character here needs 2 car values. And so when you read a car, you get a half, maybe the left half, one heart-shaped eye and half of the smile. And then you read the other car and you get the right half. And it's no good. They're meaningless, they're difficult to process. So in this day and age where Unicode is no longer a 16-bit code, but the car values are essentially useless. And the only reason that we're still using them is because the replacements are a little bit too complicated for a CS2 course. So there are better ways of doing things like isDigit. Because what you really want to do is you want to test it, is it a digit in any alphabet in the world? And some of those alphabets use characters that have 2 cars. But for right now, once in a while we still use them. And in that case, you can use car add to get them out of it. So try not to use car if you can. Oh, I don't know. I say car. It's Kai, so it's car. So yeah, some people say char, like I guess charbroiled, right? But it's character. If it's character, shouldn't it be car? I mean, it's not character. I have no idea. So I say character and car, but it's true. Some people will say char. You know, maybe they're thinking of the charbroil. All right. One of the things that you often have to do when processing input is you get a string, and then you have to fiddle apart the string into its individual components. So you've seen that with those pesky names of countries. And so you have this challenge that each of the countries have different lengths. Some of them have spaces inside and some of them don't. And so you have to have some way of saying, okay, United States, that's the part of the country, and this thing back here is the population number or whatever it was. And so that's always painful. And there are two strategies that you can use. One is you look at the line and then you use either substring or char_at to look at the ith character, and that way figure out how to cut it into pieces. Sometimes you can save yourself a little bit of pain by saying, this is a string, this is a string, this is a number. If I could just read them as if someone had typed them in. And so you can make a secondary scanner. You make here you see the primary scanner that reads the input. So we read a line from the primary scanner. Then we make a secondary scanner out of the primary scanner. And then we use it to read stuff just from this string with the same next int, has next int, and so on. So at this point we would say, as long as we don't have has next int, then there must be a part of the country name, and I just put them back together. Once has next int returns true, that means I must be in this in this part back here where the cursor is, and then you can call next int. So that's a useful trick. It's never a necessary thing. You could always, just look for the digits and this in the string with a loop, but it sometimes saves you a few lines of code. So what's not to like? Converting to numbers. You're in 46B. You're aware of the fact that there's a big difference between a string like 13 and the number 13. One is a string, the other is a number. But when you have a string, you need to extract the number out of that. And you've seen this in 46A. There's integer parse int for integers. There's double parse double for doubles. So you would get those things inside a token or a line. You might have to extract it out. You then call those methods to convert. Now there's two things that can mess up your process. The first one is spaces. If you have a space here, and you call integer.parseInt, integer.parseInt is a very busy method, and it can't be bothered with taking the spaces out for you, so you have to call trim first to do that. You'll find out when that happens to you because it'll throw an exception, and trim will get rid of these spaces. The other thing is currency symbols and decimal separators. So when you have a dollar in here or a comma, then that doesn't work either. How do you take them out? How do you take them out? You're reading in something that has commas. What? No, because if you use that, then if you were to toss these into the delimiter set, then you would get the numbers 1, 0, and 0. Because the delimiter means a delimiter. And so that you wouldn't want that. You really do need to read, you need to read in the string, and then you need to get them out somehow. How do you get them out? I guess you could go through the string and each time check the character values and only copy into another string the ones that you want to keep. But parseInt does not have a way of taking them out. In this case, it would be parse double, and there is another parsing method in the a locale-specific parser, but that's not worth doing right now. Aha!
Always times 0 is great.
Exactly. You can just replace the comma with nothing. And there go your commas, right? And the same thing with the dollar sign. Or, if you really want to be productive, you can do replace, and then you can give a regular expression, and you can say you want the dollar and the comma to be gone. And I'm not sure whether you need to use replace or replace all in that case. But you can just call replace twice. You call one replace to kill the commas, one replace to kill the dollars, and that'll work. But you have to do it. So replace is your friend in this situation. All right, so we finally clawed our way up to a clicker question. Oh, wow. No, what happened? No, what did it do? Lecture 5, clicker question 1. Yeah? No, it really makes it on the poll. All right, so let's have a look at this here. So I'm going to look at the third line here. Let's say that's line. So now it says n is line last index of space, and so that means the last index, that would be the position here, right? So let's see what our votes say. Okay, so this is very interesting. All right, let's come back to this. So again, n is going to be here. So now we're going to take as the name the substring from 0 to n. So when we take the substring from 0 to n, do I get Marianne? Or do I get Marianne with a space? That's what it's trying to ask. So do I do not get the space? Well, no space, because this when you do substring, the second index is exclusive. The second index is not taken. The n points to the space, and that means it's not included. So that means this one is wrong. So the call to an integer, okay, let's solve some of the easy ones first. Double names such as Mary Ann are not stored is also wrong, because in our case, we call last index off, so we get Mary Ann just fine. So will the call to integer.parseInt throw an exception? Let's see what we're parsing. We're taking the substring from n to the end, and so we're taking the space because it's from inclusive. And so indeed, integer.parseInt will throw an exception. So let's see what happened here. And so that was the majority answer of 60% of users. So I did manage to find 5 people who are now so scared of the poor cat with heart-shaped eyes that they blame her for all evils. But in this case, that's not the case. All right. So now here's a useful piece of information that you wished you had before. That's not in the textbook for some reason. I have to put it in the next edition. And that is the split method. So watch this. I have a line that says Marianne 30. And now I call line.split with spaces. And when I do that, I get an array of strings that contains Mary, Ann, and 30, nicely split along the spaces. Now, where would you have killed for this method yesterday? Oh, really? Yes? Yes? This way, in one fell swoop, you get your section number split up into individual sections. There's just one nasty catch to it, and that is that the thing that you split with is a regular expression. And the regular expression dot means something other than the period. The simplest way of salvaging that is to put it in brackets. Now it means the character class that just contains a dot. So at this point, now you have an array of strings. You still need to change each of the strings to numbers, but that's what integer.parseInt is for. And it is a simple matter to loop to the two. Yes?
So if we use dot split, we still do a for loop.
You would still have to, I don't know if it's a for loop, but you would still have to have a loop, because there's no, as far as I remember, there's no way of doing a lexicographic comparison of two arrays. If there was one in the standard library, then let me know, and the dollar will be yours. But I think you still have to loop. I looped. So I definitely use split. Split is the way. Yeah?
Is this split similar to regex?
Well, split will take a regex as the for the delimiter. The thing that you give it as this thing here is a regular expression. And so that's why I said you have to be careful with the dot. If you just use the dot, it matches any character. So, yeah, let's just try that out with JShell really quick. Yeah? Yes, yes. Okay, I'll do that in just a second. Let me just for fun take his point, and then I'll move on to yours. So his question was, you know, with the regex thing, and I said what you have to do is you have to do it like this, and then you see the array. Hard to see it right now. Let me print it. Here's your array. You know, isn't this beautiful? So now you have an array of strings. What happens if you don't use the brackets around? Then you get an empty array because every single thing was a delimiter. So that didn't work. So now, if I understand your question correctly, is if you want to use split, do you still have to declare the array? And yes, you do. So you would have to say string bracket nums equals. And so the string bracket here declares the variable, and now afterwards, now you can loop through nums. Was that the question from back there? Okay. Yeah, so that's what you would exactly do. You would catch it in an array. You would then, you know, loop through that array. In your case, you would do it twice, once for the first and once for the second number. And now you have two arrays, and they're almost numbers. So now you just have to do the next step and compare them as numbers. All right, so split is great, and so I use split all the time. So the most common split that I actually do is just to split along arbitrary white space. That way it doesn't matter whether it's one space or many spaces or tabs, and so that's the magic regular expression. All right, so now I have another experiment here. So I want you to do some real life active code check thing. So there's a program here that is supposed to do something. So you have an input file that looks like this. Each line has the name of a president followed by his or her, I guess they're all his at this point, by his height in feet and inches, then the number in centimeters, and then the string cm. And so this file, I actually saw this in the news. There was something where someone did the same thing for the various presidential candidates on the theory that, in general, people who were taller than average were more likely to be elected. I don't know how true that is. So anyway, so do this. So you want to read a line at a time. This thing is clearly line oriented. And then you want to fish out this number. And then you want to add them all up. So do that. It should take you a few minutes. And then I want you to vote on what is the answer that you got, because that way I will know whether you did it right or not. And it may well be something else, depending on how I chose those numbers. So let me clone this question. So in this case, the delimiter that you want to choose is some amount of white space, and so that's this one here. So just trust me that this thing means split at some amount of white space. I'll actually show you that in JShell. So let's take one of these input lines here. Where is it? Here. And now here you have your array consisting of strings Abram, Lincoln, 6, FT, 4, IN, 193, and CM. This is the one you want to get. Yeah.
I want to make the arrays and print this so I can just see what they look like.
You want to print the arrays?
I just want to print them out and see what they look like.
Yeah, in general, this is a problem that I always have in here in this terminal window. If you for debugging, you want to see what's inside an array, you use arrays.toString, and that converts it. Yeah, that's a very useful method. That's well worth remembering. Okay, could we speed this up a little? So, let me get this a little larger so you can see it. So, what are we doing here? So, we need to split the line, and now we need to get the second to last entry out of this array. All right, so, and that's the height. And so it's tokens, that's the array. And so that's how you get the second to last element out. Now, if it took you longer to type this than it just took it for me to type, then that is a sign that you would benefit from doing more programming yourself. So getting something like the second last element out of an array, you know, after semesters of programming should be so automatic that you can do it without thinking. If not, there's only one way that it becomes automatic, and that is that you do more programming problems. And that's exactly the kind of thing why I'm so negative on copy and paste. If you copy and paste that kind of code, it's not in your fingers, it's not in your automatic memory when you need it. So copy and paste doesn't help you learn programming. So you have to type it with your own fingers so that next time that you need this line, like on an exam where you're going to be doing coding, that it's there. And so it really is worth your investment in time to do your programming yourself so that your brain can just do these things completely automatically. So here's the second to last one. Now I need to convert this to an integer because it's a string, right? And again, when you do actual programming, this conversion from integers to strings, from strings to integer, is such a common task that at this point your fingers should be able to do this without much thinking at all. And so if you find that you're struggling with this and you say, gosh, you know, this is not automatic for me, then the only remedy is to do more coding. And you simply got to do it. It's the same thing with a foreign language, right? You learn the words in French or Spanish or something, and that's one thing, but then to put them together into sentences in real time, you know, is a different skill. It takes more effort, and so it's something where you guys need to get at. All right, and now we form a total, and again, forming a total is something that you should have done many times in your life, and here it is. And so let's see. And the total here, it says, is 7732. Was that one of the answers? And indeed it was. Let's see how the voting population did. What? Okay, help me out here. So it's 7732, right? How did 53% of users get at 7842? Does anyone who got 7842 have an explanation? I pulled that number out of a hat. That number comes from absolutely nowhere. This is not like a distractor or something. This is not like some alternate plausible answer. The way I did this problem is, I took this input file, I made the problem, I ran it, and then I picked a few numbers, yes? What's that? Well, 179, as it turns out, is the average height. I just wanted to bring that up. As it happens, I'm 180 centimeters tall, so, but I can't run, right? I'm not a native-born American. So, no, so that one was not really plausible, right? So anyone who answered that, I have no idea how to help you. So it is super important that you guys and girls learn to code, at the speed of thought. That it's coding at some point is just like speaking a language. That the basic things just have to kind of flow. And so if it means things like converting from one type to another, or picking out the first or the last or the middle element out of an array, or putting something to the beginning or the end of a string, all of that kind of stuff, the bridge between the high-level concept of what you want to do and then how to render that in code should at this point in time start to become reasonably automatic to you. And the only way it becomes so automatic is if you yourself do that coding. Yes?
Let's say that the height was horizontal, how do you get the total subdivision?
I'm sorry?
So let's say the height for each element was listed vertically, so it was listed horizontally instead of vertically. How would you get the height?
Oh, I see. So that's a different question that I'll come to after I'm done haranguing everyone for doing more coding. So does everyone get the point that I want you to do more coding with your own hands, right? And it's good for you because then you can do these things quickly without giving a bogus answer. All right. So do more coding. So you asked a good question. So if I understand your question correctly, is you say I'm not making. Let's say the presents are garden gnomes, and so here are the heights, right? And so you're asking how do you sum them all up in? Well, in this case, that one is pretty easy because I would read the entire line. And then I would make a secondary scanner. And then you can just use the regular loop with has next in, next in. So that, in this case, that's the low-hanging fruit because that's as easier to do. But you could use it with split as well, right? Otherwise, you could do tokens, if you don't like this way for whatever reason, line.split. And then you would have to loop through it, convert each to an integer, and add it up. So there's no particular mystery to this. All right. I'm going to skip this thing with mixing next and next line because we're kind of out of time and it's not that common a thing. So, and I'm going to skip this stuff with format specifiers because we're kind of out of time and it's easy. But I do want to talk about command line arguments. So a command line argument means that your program would run on the command line. So I've heard from the lab assistants that everyone was overjoyed that they could now learn how to run things from the command line, except for a few people who weren't. So I'm going to evangelize the command line a little bit more. So the command line is this thing that you get by typing commands into a terminal. And when people first see it, they say, what a crazy thing. Instead of just opening a file browser and visually seeing my file system, now I'm supposed to be like I'm living in some tunnel and do like ls star to find out what's in here, these commands. But the fact is that they're complementary things. When you want to visualize the file system, the visual file browser is great. When you want to do repetitive work, the file browser is terrible because everything that you want to do, you do with a mouse. And I speak with passion here because I have 160 students And if I have to do the same thing to every one of them in Canvas, Canvas is one of those evil programs where everything is done with a mouse. And the operator of such a program, the technical expression is that one dies the death of 1,000 mouse clicks. And that's what it's like. So if you want to automate anything, then you want the command line. So as an example, did I have an example of this? No. Yes, but as an example, there was someone who said, how do I make 15 directories called homework 1 to homework 15? And so I didn't even think that this was much of a question, because what you do is you say, and here I have my 15 directories. Try that in the file browser. Right, here they are, by the way. I have so many other directories here. Let me put this. It was so easy I can repeat it. Right, here they are. What if I wanted to name them something different? Here I have another 15. Yeah, try that in the file browser. It's just no contest. If you need to do repetitive stuff, the command line is your friend. Now, you're programmers, there's many, many times that you're going to be needing to do repetitive stuff. So, for example, there was a program total.java in section 11.1 that totaled up a bunch of numbers. What if you need to invoke it multiple times with different files? Then wouldn't it be nice that instead of each time being asked that personal question, what is the file name that you wish me to operate on, sir, that you could just give it on the command line, so that you could say, you know, Java total file1. Because for one thing, now it's not going to run because I don't have it in here. For one thing, if you want to do it again, you can quickly use the command line editing and do it again. Or you can do it with a for loop, like I have done here, and say, run it for a bunch of things. So the command line is the programmer's friend, and you want to know how to do it in your own programs. So, and it's pretty trivial to do. All you have to do is you write a main the way you've always done it, and now you start using this thing that previously you didn't know what it was for. So the args thing holds what was passed in the command line. You only benefit from the command line if you invoke the program from the terminal. When you do it from inside Eclipse or BlueJ, it does you no good at all. But there are situations when that is super useful, and so you want to learn how to use it. And so args just has the things that were passed as arguments, and then you use them. So have a look at this if you haven't so already. It is in one of the labs. Now, take homework 3 seriously. I didn't even put that up here. Homework 3 is, I would say, at least twice as hard as homework 2. Homework 2 was pretty easy. Homework 3 is hard. If you try to get done with homework 3 like Saturday afternoon, you are likely not going to be able to do it. If for whatever reason you cannot do homework 3, resist the temptation of taking code from someone else. You're better off turning in something that doesn't work or turning in nothing. All right, happy coding, do more of it.